The soldier who refused to kill. Hook. There was a soldier in World War II who went into one of the deadliest battles in history without carrying a single weapon. Not a rifle, not a pistol, not even a knife. And by the end of the battle, he had saved 75 men while everyone else around him was trying to kill each other. This is his story. His name was Desmond Doss, and he became the first conscientious objector to receive the Medal of Honor. But before we get to that moment on top of a cliff in Okinawa where he did the impossible, you need to understand why a man would choose to run into machine gun fire completely defenseless. Because what happened to him as a kid changed everything. Desmond grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia during the Great Depression. His father was a World War I veteran who came back broken. The war had destroyed him mentally, and he turned to alcohol to cope with whatever he saw over there. Desmond watched his father become violent, watched him struggle, watched him almost kill his own uncle during a drunken fight. Desmond had to pull a gun on his own father to stop him from committing murder. That moment stuck with him. He looked down at that gun in his hands and made a promise to himself and to God. He would never take a life, ever. He had a poster on his wall growing up, one of those religious posters with the 10 Commandments. The one that said, "Thou shalt not kill," burned into his mind. He took it literally, completely literally. So when December 7th, 1941 happened and Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, Desmond faced an impossible situation. He wanted to serve his country. He felt it was his duty, but he refused to carry a weapon. He refused to train on weapons. He refused to even touch a rifle. He wanted to serve as a medic, as a combat medic, saving lives instead of taking them. Everyone thought he was insane. When Desmond enlisted in April 1942, the Army didn't know what to do with him. They tried to reject him. They told him he couldn't serve without being willing to carry a weapon. But technically, there was no rule that said he had to. The military had provisions for conscientious objectors, but most of them chose non-combat roles or didn't serve at all. Desmond wanted to go to the front lines, as a medic, unarmed. His training was a nightmare. The other soldiers hated him. They thought he was a coward. They thought he was using religion as an excuse to avoid fighting. His own unit turned against him. They beat him up. They threw boots at him while he slept. They made his life miserable, trying to force him to quit. The sergeants and officers were even worse. They tried to have him discharged on psychiatric grounds. They called him unfit for service. They said he was a danger to his unit. One officer told him directly, "You're going to get men killed because you won't carry a rifle to protect them." But Desmond wouldn't break. He kept training. He learned everything a combat medic needed to know. He could treat wounds, stop bleeding, perform emergency procedures under pressure. He studied harder than anyone else because he knew he had to be twice as good to prove himself. He did all the physical training, all the drills, everything except weapons training. When everyone else went to the rifle range, Desmond went to the aid station to practice his medical skills. His unit was the 77th Infantry Division, and they were preparing for deployment to the Pacific. The officers made one last attempt to get rid of him. They brought him up on charges for refusing to obey orders. They court-martialed him, but Desmond had something on his side: the regulations. Technically, he wasn't breaking any rules. He was a registered conscientious objector due to his Seventh-day Adventist faith. The charges were dropped, but barely. He shipped out with his unit to the Pacific Theater, and that's when everything changed. His first real test came at Guam in 1944. The 77th Infantry was tasked with taking the island from Japanese forces. This wasn't training anymore. This was real combat. Bullets flying, explosions, men screaming, chaos everywhere. And there was Desmond, running through it all with just his medical bag. He didn't hide. He didn't stay back. He ran toward the fighting. When someone got hit, Desmond was there. He treated men under fire. He dragged wounded soldiers to safety. He worked through the night, through artillery bombardments, through everything. And something started to change in his unit. The men who had beaten him up during training, who had called him a coward, started to see something different. This guy wasn't scared. He was braver than most of them. He was just brave in a different way. At Guam, he saved multiple lives. Then came Leyte in the Philippines. More combat, more wounded, more impossible situations. And every single time there was Desmond doing his job without any way to protect himself. He earned respect slowly, one life at a time, but nobody knew what was coming next. Okinawa, April 1945. The battle for Okinawa was one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific War. The Japanese were defending their homeland territory, and they weren't going to give it up easily. The 77th Infantry Division was ordered to take a formation called the Mita Escarpment. The Americans called it Hacksaw Ridge. Picture a cliff face about 400 feet high, almost completely vertical. The only way up was cargo nets that the soldiers had to climb while Japanese machine guns, mortars, and grenades rained down on them. It was a death trap, but they had to take it. Desmond climbed up with his unit on April 29th. The fighting at the top was brutal, hand-to-hand combat, grenades going off everywhere, machine gun fire from hidden bunkers. Men were getting torn apart. The 77th suffered massive casualties trying to hold the position, and then the order came to retreat, fall back down the cliff. The position was too costly to hold. But there were wounded men up there, dozens of them, men who couldn't climb down on their own, men who would be left behind to die or be captured by the Japanese, which was pretty much the same thing. Everyone started retreating down the cliff. Everyone except Desmond. He stayed, completely alone on top of Hacksaw Ridge with wounded men scattered everywhere and Japanese soldiers closing in. He didn't have a weapon to defend himself. He just had his faith and his medical bag, and he started working. He would treat a man's wounds, drag him to the edge of the cliff, tie a rope around him and lower him down, then run back through enemy fire to find the next wounded soldier. He did this over and over again. Machine gun bullets zipping past him, grenades exploding around him, Japanese soldiers everywhere, and he kept going. He prayed the same prayer every time he lowered a man down. Please God, help me get one more, just one more. He stayed up there all night. The battle raged around him. He treated enemies too. When he found wounded Japanese soldiers, he gave them medical care. That's who he was. He wasn't there to judge or pick sides in that moment. He was there to save lives. By the time the sun came up, Desmond had single-handedly lowered 75 men down that cliff. 75. One at a time, without a weapon, without any way to protect himself except prayer. When he finally came down, he collapsed from exhaustion. His unit couldn't believe it. The same men who had beaten him up in training, who had called him a coward, were crying. They were alive because of him. Some of them had been lowered down that cliff by Desmond's hands. But his war wasn't over yet. A few weeks later, during another battle on Okinawa, Desmond was treating wounded soldiers when a grenade landed near him. He could have run, but there were wounded men who couldn't move. So he threw himself on the grenade to protect them. It exploded. Shrapnel tore through his legs and lower body. He was badly wounded. While waiting for others to carry him to safety, he saw another soldier get hit worse than him. So Desmond rolled off the stretcher and told them to take the other man first. While waiting, a sniper bullet went through his arm, shattering the bone. Desmond treated his own wounds. He made a splint for his shattered arm using a rifle stock. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who refused to carry a rifle his entire service used one to save his own life, just not in the way anyone expected. He was finally evacuated off Okinawa. His war was over. He had lost a lot of blood. His body was wrecked, but he was alive. On October 12, 1945, President Harry Truman awarded Desmond Doss the Medal of Honor at the White House. He was the first conscientious objector to receive the nation's highest military award. The medal citation talked about his outstanding bravery and unflinching determination in the face of desperately dangerous conditions. But here's what makes this story even more powerful. Desmond didn't do it for recognition. He didn't do it to prove people wrong. He did it because he genuinely believed that every life was sacred. Even in the middle of the worst war in human history, even when everyone around him was trying to kill each other, he chose a different path. The men of the 77th Infantry Division refused to go into combat unless Desmond Doss was with them. Think about that. The same guys who tried to force him out during training wouldn't fight without him by their side. They felt safer with an unarmed medic than they did with extra riflemen, because they knew if they got hit, Desmond would come for them. No matter what, no matter the danger, he would come. After the war, Desmond went home to Virginia. He married Dorothy Shutt, the woman who had waited for him. He struggled with his wounds for the rest of his life. The tuberculosis he contracted after the war took one of his lungs and several ribs. He had hearing loss from the explosions. His arm never fully healed. But he didn't complain. He spent the rest of his life living quietly, working, raising a family. He passed away on March 23, 2006, at the age of 87. At his funeral, veterans who had served with him told stories about the man who saved their lives, about the medic who ran toward danger when everyone else was running away, about the soldier who proved that you don't need a weapon to be brave. There's something about Desmond's story that hits different than other war stories. Most war heroes are remembered for how many enemies they killed. Desmond is remembered for how many friends he saved. Most soldiers carried guns and occasionally had to save lives. Desmond carried medical supplies and occasionally had to save himself. He flipped the entire concept of what it means to be a soldier. The thing is, he wasn't trying to make a statement. He wasn't trying to be different or special. He just had a conviction, a belief that was so strong that nothing could shake it. Not the hatred from his fellow soldiers, not the danger of combat, not even a grenade blast could make him compromise what he believed in. And maybe that's the real lesson here. In a world that told him he had to choose between his beliefs and his duty, he found a way to honor both. In a war where everyone else picked up weapons, he picked up wounded soldiers instead. In the face of violence, he chose healing. And somehow, impossibly, it worked. 75 men went home to their families because one unarmed soldier refused to leave them behind. That's not just a war story. That's something else entirely. Subscribe for more untold stories from World War II.